You all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey y'all, this is Whitney and welcome back to an episode of Spastic Chatter. If you're new here, Spastic Chatter is a platform meant to feature those in the Cerebral Palsy community, and I get together with individuals with CP like myself to have an uncensored chat, if you will, about what it's like living with this type of disability. And for
Mm,
this week, I have Adrian, and he is I guess a fan of Spastic Chatter, and he reached out to me and wanted to be a guest, and we're gonna. I'm excited to where this episode goes because I think we're gonna hit on some topics that I haven't discussed, and of course like share his story. So
absolutely.
so if you want to introduce yourself, Adrian, and then we'll get on to the conversation. So,
Hey guys, my name's Adrian. I'm actually really excited for this. Um, I've been following this podcast for a while, um, and I'm rather curious to see what happens in this conversation. So let's just jump into it.
awesome. Well, can you tell me like a little bit more about yourself, like what you have going on, what you're interested
Mm.
in, let's just start from there.
Yeah, sure. As far as I understand it, I was born uh 26 weeks premature and had a brain bleed that caused my CP. I'm uh, on the higher functioning end. Um, some of the physical issues and abnormalities are still there. Yeah, that's how it started, man. Um,
Yeah, I like how like we always like to say that we're on the like you mentioned that you're on the higher end of functioning, and I always bring up that cerebral palsy is like so it's so like vast. Like there's like it really is a broad spectrum.
it really is. It absolutely is. I've met so many people that had the same thing that I do that are yet so different from me, and I get to experience what they experience through course of being with them, and it's like, man, this
Yeah,
is crazy. Um,
yeah. I'm curious. That like I said before we get on this call, before we started recording, and I mentioned this in all my episodes. When you Google the term cerebral palsy, it comes up as a childhood disability, and I always say that I don't think my childhood was any different than like the quote unquote normal childhood. Well,
mm,
how would you describe your childhood, like, Adrian?
I was I was very aware of my disability as a kid, and it actually, I went through physical therapy. I had uh, a couple of different surgeries. Um, I've got about 13 scars over the course of my body from surgery. And so I was really, really aware that I was different growing up, or that something was different about me. And I think for me, I had the opposite of your experience in the sense that I felt like an outlier amongst my peers.
Yeah, I like how we can have two. Like it's not everyone's story is different. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I like how we can showcase that. What kind of like like let's talk about like your schooling. Or like your did you like were you like mainstreamed, and then like did you like
Hmm.
graduate from high school and then go on to like
Yeah, I was mainstreamed most of the time, but they had me in physical therapy and uh like special ed courses
yeah.
for a very long time until I was probably 11 or 12. And then they kept me in the special ed courses because I quit physical therapy because I was ignorant. um, and you could never, I was the type of kid where you couldn't tell me what to do. I had to experience it myself. Um, and so they had me in LD courses. They had me in some kinds of physical therapy. They had adaptive things in gym class that I could do if I couldn't do the current activity. Um, and so a lot of it was weird because it was and I say weird in a personal way. My schooling was relatively normal, but I was always very, very aware that I was different. And I didn't have very many people around me that understood what I would go through on a daily basis, whether it be the pain, the the nervous pain, the physical spasms and things of that nature, like with your body and some of that stuff. And then I met a high school friend. My I think it was my sophomore year. His name was Zach. Zach also had cerebral palsy, and he was also one of those people that was very, very loud-mouthed and fun, and you couldn't tell him what to do. And so him and I got into a conversation one day in our geometry class, and he had kind of seen me around, and like we had a couple of mutual friends that we'd hang out together at school, and he was like, "Hey, do you have cerebral palsy?" He's like, "I don't mean to be weird, but do you have this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do. Why?" And he's like, "Bro, because I have the exact same thing." And I remember the moment where it shifted in my head, because so often with our disability, and any disability for that matter, it's very easy to feel misunderstood and rejected, and very much like you can't function in what society would consider normal, you know.
Yeah.
And I had that moment with him, and I was like, okay, this guy gets me. Let's go.
That's funny.
Um,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
like I think it's funny that like, or no, not funny. That's bad choice of words, but like I can spot if somebody has CP like right off the bat because I can
yeah,
we have the same, especially if it's like spastic CP. We have the
mm,
same like characteristics, but
yeah,
the severity can be like different. So, and I
yeah.
love
The
how
severity is definitely different.
I love how you like found camaraderie and like you're in like a fellow friend that has that
Yeah,
has
that was the first time that it ever happened in my life, and
yeah,
I was a 16-year-old sophomore.
that's very cool. So like what happened? Like what was your journey after high school? Like
Um,
you want to talk about that?
my journey after high school was weird because I also came from a very complex background. My father was a minister, and my mother didn't want that much to do with the church and religion and things like that, and they were divorced. And so I had a kind of complex view of the world from a very early age. And I was also living with my father's grandfather at the time, who had some health issues. Um, and so my journey after high school literally was separating from a lot of negative influences. At the time, I was being a teenager and experimenting with things I should not have, and I was very, very into that experimentation, if you know what I mean. um, and so a lot of it for me was separating from a lot of negative influences and deciding to go to college. Um, and it's a larger story than we have time for, but I decided to go to college. I didn't do very well in school at all. Um, just by course of events and disability and certain other things that I had issues with. I've had issues with school my whole life. Um, and so I decided to go to college, but I was like, do I want to go to a tech school or do I want to like go to part of my father's requirements or suggestions was that I go to a Bible college. And at the time, I wasn't a believer. Um, I was coming back to a sense of faith in God, so to speak. But I wasn't a believer, and so it was a struggle for me to do that. And then I ended up going to college just to kind of try to figure out what I believed, and it turned into, okay, now I feel like God's moving me in a way that a lot of the things that you see me doing now, my social presences, are things that I felt like I was led to do. Um, on top of that, interesting topic that we bring up college. One of my professors in class mentioned this man named Alan Oggs. Alan Oggs was a minister in the 50s who had cerebral palsy. And I'd heard of the man in passing before because a lot of my family members are in ministry. And so like I had been aware of his presence, so to speak, but I hadn't really engaged with the things that he wrote and who he was and what that was all about. And I was about 20 and I picked up his book based on a suggestion of a professor who was kind of telling me parts of his story. And it was another moment where I felt this sense of camaraderie. Like I wasn't the only person that understood me. You know what I'm saying? Because if you go through and you read his book, he wrote a book called You Gotta Have the Want To. And if you go through and you read his book, the first 2 or 3 chapters are literally what every person with cerebral palsy goes through on some level. Some of the emotional issues, a lot of the physical ones. He deals with the impact that had on his growing up that he wasn't entirely ready to admit until he was older. And so like the value of college for me was not only getting a degree in theology and understanding what I believed, or at least the core of what I believed, because belief is a lot more complicated than we care to admit. But it was also finding that person's book and being able to like connect with something that made me feel seen and heard, because for so much of my life I hadn't felt that.
That's very cool. And like I like how you found somebody that like kind of was on the same like your journeys kind of had similarities to each other, where he had CP and he was involved in ministry, like you have CP and you're involved in ministry, and then you're talking about camaraderie in that, because I know we talked before this, and like you had asked if it was okay to bring up religion on this podcast, and my response to that is I'm sharing your story. So like if your story deals with religion and things like that, like who am I to judge your
exactly story? Yeah,
like,
and that's part of the reason I asked, was just because I wasn't aware of what I could share, you know.
Yeah, I just wanted to put like that disclaimer there that this podcast is for everyone. It's not. I'm not going to turn
exactly
you away.
And I totally agree with that, and I see it, and I value it actually. And so the biggest thing that I came away with was I always had a struggle with not only believing in God, but believing in myself and that God loved me for who I was because I was disabled. Um, and oftentimes it gets really easy to, as a person with a disability, look in the mirror some days and say, why me? Why am I the one that has to go through this? But the value that I saw in that is that it's you, right? If if God created you and the world shaped you into who you need to be, then the answer to the question why me is because it's you.
Yeah, I
You're
totally,
the only one that can share your story from the perspective that you can,
I totally agree with that. And
you know.
whether or not I'm like, whether or not I'm religious or not, or whoever's watching this, like, I still believe that what we're talking about and like your story can still resonate with with a lot of with a lot of people. Like and because you like you mentioned that the world shapes you. No more like, so like what's going on, like how society like kind of puts this label on people with disabilities, like that plays a part in in shaping shaping who we are. We can
Yeah, yeah, it does.
either embrace our disability, like I totally embrace my disability, but like younger Whitney did not embrace her disability. She wanted it. She wanted people to see her ability before her disability. And now I'm at almost 33 years old. I'm like, I'm disabled and proud. Like there's stuff I can't do, and that's totally okay. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
there's like
It is.
liberation. There's like a liberation in that. So
I'm 24 and I'm just now getting to where you're at right now,
yeah. Well,
where I can actually embrace it.
you have plenty of time, because like when I was your age, I was all like see my like I had some like cringy posts like ability over disability, and now I'm like, oh no, I'm disabled and I'm proud. But I'm I'm curious, like what are your future goals?
My future goals. Okay, wow, this is a lot because I'm doing a lot of them right now as we speak, actually. I would like to get into not only ministry, but I would like to get into public speaking and writing. I'm also in the process of becoming a certified life coach. Um, and really just being able to create and to learn and to give people something of substance out of my life. You know,
That's very cool. And like doing opportunities like this helps you with your helps you like get your name out there with your speaking opportunities, and like
yeah.
even your life coaching, so that's very awesome. Where I like to, the very last question I like to ask people is if they have any advice for those watching that might be in the same season of life they're in, or like, so
Mm.
do you have any advice, Adrian, for those who might be watching this?
Yeah, I think my biggest piece of advice uh, is when you're talking to yourself in the mirror and you want to say that question, why me? Because understanding why you exist with cerebral palsy can be kind of hard. Um, and I'm the type of person to ask those kind of questions. I get really really low on myself, and it's not good. Um, but I think it comes to the question, why me? And what you have to understand is the answer to the question is because it's you, and that no matter what, people seeing you and hearing you talk and speak and do whatever you do is a testimony of two things. It's a testimony of perseverance, and it's a testimony of the grace of God. And my biggest piece of advice is when you ask the question, why me? Reframe that question in the positive and say, yeah, why me?
Awesome.
And the answer is because it's you.
Yeah, I love that. Where can people follow you on social media?
I'm on Instagram as Adrian the Thinker. It's very pretentious of me, I know, but I didn't know what to say. I'm also on Facebook as Adrian L. Simmons. Those are my only current platforms.
Well, I will put those in the description so people can follow you. And thank you, Adrian, for being a guest on Spastic Chatter. I really enjoyed talking with you because I think that what we discussed today is something that society doesn't really discuss. So I enjoy having these types of conversations.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Yeah, it's very empowering.
yeah. And if you're watching this and you want to be on an episode of Spastic Chatter, feel free to reach out to me wherever you see this episode or wherever you're listening to or from. I'd love to have you, and check back periodically for another episode. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has actually been an amazing conversation.